Girl, real talk. This whole "it's a new year, time to reinvent myself" trash is not the vibe for 2024. You can find someone who loves you for you, as you are. You don't need to read a stack of self-help books, only eat sad salads, or start meditating at 5 a.m. to be ready for dating. So yeah, my advice is to download Bumble and find someone who embraces you the way you are right now. Let me know how it goes.
This is Central Texas Life with Ann Harder.
Hello and welcome to Central Texas Life, the podcast. Ann Harder here with you, and it is my great pleasure to welcome to the podcast Congressman Pete Sessions.
Your friend.
Friend, that's exactly right. Our representative for District 17 handily won re-election, and as we speak, just days ago, by 66.5% of the vote, I think, over your Democrat challenger. So
something like that.
Yeah. So here we are, not really knowing for sure about the balance of power in the House.
That's right. And I've spoken to several candidates today, and of course we get to watch on TV this thing play out. What's interesting, Ann, is that there was some bit of this discussion about voting irregularity, abnormality, and inconsistencies across the country. And so a large number of Republican candidates chose, or people associated with the conservative cause, chose to say, go on the last day and vote. And so there are an incredible number of ballots yet to be counted.
That were early vote. An early
that
vote.
Were mailed in.
Or mailed in.
Or were at a drop box even.
Yeah.
Don't go until the last day. And in lots of places.
And what was the rationale for that?
Well, the questioning is, as things are reported, you see what are reported, and there's some viewpoint that where there is manipulation, they don't know how much to manipulate.
I got you.
You don't have a runaway election when you're manipulating.
Yeah, some lessons were learned, shall we say, from 2020?
I would say unlessons were learned.
Yeah.
Most people really do not have a real succinct idea about what kind of irregularities, abnormalities, and inconsistencies took place. And that is essentially part of my job. I sit on government reform. I was the subcommittee ranking member for a subcommittee called Liberty and Law.
Mm-hmm.
Those three characteristics, the big things we handle are FISA, which is foreign intelligence, the border, and voting, federal elections.
Right.
So I have done deep dives in these, and am not the expert, but talked to a good number of experts in the states who do understand abnormalities, inconsistencies, and irregularities. And there are people, so this became a viewpoint. So I spoke to a person in Arizona. I've spoken to a person in California. The viewpoint was, we're going to get ours in the mailbox or in the mail or at the distribution center the last day.
Interesting.
So that's why there's this vast number. So that's why people are still holding out saying, hold on, not over.
Right, exactly. Of course, I harken back to the old days where on election night you knew pretty much who won. And
well,
so
that is the way it is in a number of states.
Exact. Texas seemed to be able to do it.
Seemingly. I won't call us because I'm aware of voting abnormalities, inconsistencies, and irregularities.
You got that down.
Well, that is what it is.
Right. You didn't invent it, but yeah.
Well, and that's why you're able to have a discussion that these election officials will not respond to. So that's part of being in the majority. We're going to have these discussions now because the Democrats were not interested. They wanted to accuse us of things, but they did not actually want to come and ask questions.
And maybe find some solutions so
Well,
things
giving
can be
answers.
fixed.
I mean,
Yeah.
answers are what we need. These are not accusations.
Right.
They are obvious and we don't know intentional. We don't know. But when the state of Texas will not even ask their own questions, or a county administrator, ballot administrator, elections administrator won't answer questions, then one would say, why not? Why will they not engage official federal representation that has that oversight responsibility?
Well, it kind of is their job too.
Well, it might be, but
Yeah.
why wouldn't they want
Right.
to? Oh, so
Yeah.
this has led people then say, we'll
Right.
just vote late.
And okay, well, long answer, but that's fascinating. I was not aware of that, but I think. Well, I'll just ask you, what is your feeling about it? Do you feel like the GOP will take the House?
My feeling is that based upon what we presently look at, we do anticipate
Okay,
that.
so with that,
But we'd anticipated knowing a lot earlier, and we'd
that's for sure,
anticipated
yeah.
there being maybe some more specific results that would have been available a day or two ago,
Right.
which would have taken this guessing away.
Away, right. But working under the assumption that will be the case, what in your mind is the first thing that needs to be done?
The first thing that's done is we need actually to look at what we need from our leadership team.
Yeah.
I sat for 10 years in Republican leadership. We had a pretty clear idea, at least among ourselves, if not expressed openly, about what we intended to do and how we needed the team to react to that. I think that's the biggest issue. Second thing is issues that impact the country. We have a border problem. The open border is the largest single national security issue and has caused every state to be a border state. There are 300 essentially young people, 19 to 35, that are dying every day. 300 because of the open border of fentanyl that is coming directly from China through Colombia or Mexico, transported up. The drug cartels are complete. This is not a new issue.
Right.
Completely in charge of the border, completely in charge of the routes in Mexico. They are making $1 billion. They used to make a few years ago off smuggling $100 million. They're now 10 and 12 times that because the number of people coming across they control. There's conversations with people that we do know about, confirmed by federal law enforcement, where people can't pay. They pay it off by working for the cartel once they get here. The marketing organization of these cartels in working with China is very apparent, and it is a marketing effort. You've seen where they put drugs in candy. They try and hide things. They make them available. They are killing our children. And this is, in my opinion, the number one issue. And it might take, so the question is, okay, how do you go about doing that? Well, yesterday we heard President Biden say, no policy changes, none. Well, I think that was an easy view to take as a message, but actually the House of Representatives, under this thing called the Constitution, has Article 1, Section 7. Article 1, Section 7, which we utilized every year we were in the majority, says that all revenue matters start in the House of Representatives. Now, you might say, well, you won't get agreement with the Senate. That's right. They still start in the House of Representatives. And so if there is no funding mechanism, there is no mechanism for following through to pay for the government. So I believe that we have been given by the Constitution now it's the will that we need to have to say we are going to, as a signing bonus, we're the majority, here's what we want done. Now, you would say, well, what kind of track record do you have in that, Pete? Well, the track record we have goes back to a guy named Bill Clinton, President Clinton. Then we had George W. Bush. Then we had a guy named Barack Obama. Then we've got a guy named Donald Trump. Now we've had President Biden. The characteristics that are interesting with those Democrats, President Clinton, President Obama, President Biden, is they both lost their majority, at least in the House, after 2 years because of excessive spending, unwise policy, and use of America's future that they put in jeopardy. So the Republican House had to come back, even though we could not necessarily negotiate with the Senate. We came back with answers to each one of those. And President Clinton, President Obama, as an example, President Obama changed 13 different piece parts of his Obamacare health care plan that we changed and he signed into law.
So there was a recognition.
There was a negotiation.
Do you think that will happen with Joe Biden?
Well, the problem is that if he doesn't, we won't.
Right.
If he does not negotiate, which is part of the American framework of not just politics but constitutional government, we will then be in a split government circumstance. And so then that's why our leadership needs to say, here's what we want in regard to that. Is it hardball? Yeah, it may end up being hardball. Is it the right thing to do? I think arguing for our children, for the safety of our streets and cities, for national security, I'm willing to say all out.
Absolutely. And I think the president is a little bit concerned that as the balance of power shifts in the House, that there might be some investigation into his son Hunter and the famous laptop and all that. What you would care to weigh in on any of that?
Sure.
What steps might need to be taken? Or
well, I would say, Ann, that I would ask that you see that the problems are larger than just the Hunter Biden laptop. We believe that, I believe as a member of government reform, we should agree that we are going to come and ask questions of the Attorney General. This is the Department of Justice, which is being led by an Attorney General that if we wanted to make it personal, we could, but this is policy. And his policies need to be understood. His policies that are on top of the FBI, where the line of delineation about where the Bureau makes decisions, where the Department of Justice makes decisions. And I would go back to any early point, but probably a point of when we had the Attorney General of the United States specifically tell the FBI to go into Virginia and go after parents that were standing up for their children in school board meetings and had law enforcement producing what I consider to be political outcomes as opposed to a law enforcement organization. Remember, FBI, fidelity, bravery, integrity. FBI. My father was a former director.
Yes, indeed he was. Yeah.
My father also understood, and few people remember this today, he got fired by President Clinton for him not doing what Janet Reno wanted the Bureau to become.
Yeah.
And
so the seeds of this go back.
They go back.
Yeah.
And it is an activist view of the use of federal law enforcement for political powers. Now,
Horrifying.
you would say, well, this has been done somewhat in the past during segregation.
Right.
University of Mississippi. Yes, but that was with a court order.
Right. There were different
Well, it was with a
layers
court
of
order.
things.
It was a
Right.
court order.
Right.
It was not an administration. It was
Right.
sure an administration showing up to Judge Johnson's court to indicate what their position was. This is actually the Attorney General of the United States telling federal law enforcement. So my conversation that I have had publicly, not privately, with Director Wray, is he has, just as my dad had, an obligation to be careful with the Bureau's recommendation and reputation about what they do. And, of course, it leads to conflict.
Yeah.
So we're going to vet the Attorney General. What are you telling them to do? And then somewhere in that line, obviously, will be the Hunter Biden laptop. And the assumption there is, obviously, you're not equally weighing justice. You are delaying this as perhaps a political persuasion, based upon the president, based upon some position that you, Attorney General, have taken, and we'd like to vet that. And this is exactly what Republicans did with Janet Reno. She was asked to be 3 different times. I think she appeared 4 times, but 3 different times before government reform, and 3 of those times she went to the hospital for exhaustion and did not show. So that lent itself to, instead of her defending her own actions, it lent itself to a broadside attack of the conclusion. So we very carefully got the U.S. attorney then. I mean, the string goes all the way down to where we then went, okay, the Attorney General, Janet Reno, is not up to this. She cannot take the scrutiny as a professional. The job is bigger than the Attorney General, even though she's longest serving Attorney General. So we went to U.S. attorneys and found out there were huge inconsistencies of their recommendation and what she ended up saying. And I think that is illuminating and important in our life of not just the Department of Justice, but oversight to them.
Mm-hmm.
Bros and heroes. Gonna tell you about bros and heroes. Gonna tell you about.
Hey, I'm Zach,
And I'm Mike.
and we have a fantastic new podcast to tell you about. Bros, Foes, and Heroes. It's the 2 of us looking into the world of comics, breaking down some characters that you may have never heard of, and some that are just absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, so Zach comes up with a character each time, and I go into it just completely blind. I don't know who this person is or what their abilities are or anything, and basically I guess we kind of go over their origin story and just some of the ridiculous stuff that maybe, especially Golden Age stuff.
Oh, Golden Age stuff is always the best, and we will make sure to highlight all of the shenanigans and just absolute weirdness of everything.
Yeah, that's right. So subscribe today and follow us on Instagram at Bros Foes Heroes.
And if you don't, I know where you live. Not really, but please subscribe.
Bros and heroes. Gonna tell you about bros and heroes. Gonna tell you about.
Hi, this is Sarah,
And I'm Carter.
and this is Some of Our Thoughts.
We're 2 Southern sommeliers, and we want to share everything we love and know about wine. We started hanging out during quarantine and cooking and drinking and listening to music, and we just thought this would be a great way to bring everything we know to you guys.
We will make wine knowledge and food pairings easy and approachable. So put on your favorite vinyl, grab your favorite glass of wine, tune into our show, and let's have some fun.
Wine and vinyl. So check us out on roguemedianetwork.com or wherever you get your favorite podcast. We'll be talking about a lot.
Welcome to One Star Rewind, a new podcast about those dreaded one-star reviews that every business owner hates to receive, but yet every customer loves to read. During this podcast, we will peel back that one-star review to better understand how it happened, when it happened, and what the business owner is doing after receiving that one-star review. This podcast will be about love, hate, and laughter. On One Star Rewind, we will meet with real business owners who will tell their stories and how they do rely on reviews for their business. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or download us at roguemedianetwork.com. Please subscribe, but only rate and review for not a one-star review. Join us each time for a new review and a new story.
Girl, real talk. This whole it's new year, time to reinvent myself trash is not the vibe for 2024. You can find someone who loves you for you, as you are. You don't need to read a stack of self-help books, only eat sad salads, or start meditating at 5 a.m. to be ready for dating. So yeah, my advice is to download Bumble and find someone who embraces you the way you are right now. Let me know how it goes.
You spend a lot of time in the district. I think you're kind of proud of the fact that if you don't have to be in Washington on the weekend, you are in the district hearing your
I've never spent
constituents.
a weekend in Washington while elected
Yeah.
as a member of Congress.
Mhm.
I've never done that. I don't derive my power from there. But likewise, I think it's important that I go to church. I want to be here. I don't want to be there. I want to be somewhere in the district. And there are people who have that same viewpoint. So the viewpoint is shared by people.
Mm-hmm. And you're also very giving of your time to help other conservative candidates in their quest for election. Let's talk a little bit about that. Some folks you've worked with.
Sure. We've got a couple that I have used money to give to. One of them is a guy named Steve Shabbat, who at this point is behind in Ohio. Don't know what's going to happen. Another one is a man named Scott Baugh. I know these men personally. I've taken time. I talked to Scott this morning for a few minutes, which is where I gleaned some of the information about the walk-in or mail-in ballots. I've helped our candidates down in the valley, but I deeply believe that there are characteristics of people who are running for the right reason, and those are people who I endorse and I help them with common sense approach. There are some people who just like to get endorsements from one or two big names, and I choose to be the kind, and I was chairman of the National Republican Congressional Committee, and during that period of time, we hold a record, net 63 seats in 2010, and that is because we, from a mature, disciplined perspective, sold the fight. I still believe it is possible today that if you go and with discipline and with understanding of what you're attempting to accomplish, you can do it, that people will weigh and measure that, and they will compare and contrast. And after all, these are things that we want from voters. We want from voters to, by and large, understand what are the issues, what are some of the thoughts and ideas for that, and what can I as a candidate be counted on to support. It's not conservative or liberal or progressive or moderate. It is actually on an issue-by-issue basis. And then people who would wish to choose to be with you can be with you, and then people who are swing voters, which is essentially, I call it a 40-40-20 country, 40% here, 40% here, and 20% in the middle. I think it's now 24% in the middle.
You think so?
I do. I think it's 24%, so that not the middle has grown, but rather people who will make a decision about either voting or not voting, and then which way they vote. if I were a political science professor, and I've taught lots of classes, but am not a pro at this, they teach how decision making is and where and how people make decisions and what that decision making tree or table is. And I think that's still alive today, but it also gets back to how you sell the fight, how you present yourself, and how you go about touching base with people. So these are things that we try and teach to candidates.
Right, and I think there'll be a lot of new people in Congress that not politician types, not run for office before. I mean, some really new, fresh eyes.
Perhaps
on problems.
Perhaps. I find that newer people don't want to vote.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they can't make tough decisions.
They're just kind of
all
overwhelmed.
Of a sudden, they're. I would say this: there isn't one candidate that I've seen that didn't think every problem could be solved in a campaign. You get where it's got to get 218 votes, it's got to go through a process, it's got to get to the Senate, it becomes far, far more complex. And this is where promises get hard. So what I would say to you is that I tend to look at new candidates that I want them to come up and learn their skill set and their trade and know what they're selling more than us thinking they're a valuable asset. The valuable asset is they either make you the majority or the minority.
Right.
But I think increasingly I see where people need to actually understand that what they said they were going to do and following up to get that done is a lot of hard work. And so they tend to then see that longer view once they get elected. And this is where the difference between Republican and Democrat, liberals and conservatives, it gets very difficult, and that translate to people who are unhappy or happy either way.
Let's talk a little bit about Kevin McCarthy speakership. How do you see things changing, and will it affect you? Are you going to stay? You want to stay on the committees you're involved with? Will there be some changes for you there?
I think that as of right now, there's a lot of uncertainty about, I think it's generally thought that Republicans would be in the majority.
Right.
What's majority? 218. We're going to be
208 as we speak.
But we got to get to 218.
Right.
Somebody has to get to 218 first. There will be no tie.
Yeah.
217 is a tie. 218 is not a tie. With the majority comes literally all the power of chairmanship, power of deciding what will be on the floor, when it's on the floor. There is some shared power in there. As chairman of the Rules Committee, I had extraordinary powers to exercise, and you have to be wise about how you do that and not about self-serving. But the problems that we get into, which we have had in the past, moving an agenda at 218 or 219 votes becomes a little bit more complex. And so you tend to look at the leadership model. I think our leadership model right now, I happen to believe the president has dug in.
Yeah.
And there are huge issues that must be not just addressed, but accomplished. And because of the knowledge that I believe that I have, I'm sure others do too, they can figure it out, of this Article 1, Section 7, you're going to have a tough guy, woman. You're going to have a tough person who will effectively understand not only the tools at their discretion, but the need and desire to sell that. And so I think that's what our party, Kevin McCarthy or not, I'm not discussing that. Let's see where we are, and then the outcome of that will decide and should decide what kind of a person do we need. So in our past, we've had these kinds of people who are tough guys. Yeah, tough guys who held people accountable, who found ways to get things done. A guy named Tom DeLay is one name that comes up. And Tom effectively played to win. He did not play not to lose. He did not play for a tie. He decided where that bullseye would be. As an Eagle Scout, I talk a lot about, we do map and compass things in scouting. We learned how to get a map and then the analogies of how you live your life. I grew up as a Methodist, living a life true north. Well, there's also, when you learn about map and compass, there's a term called declination. And declination is that difference between magnetic north and true north.
Mm-hmm.
I think Tom looks at true north. That's the way he was raised. That's the way he sees the world. I think we're looking for somebody like Tom DeLay who also understands declination. That you don't have to be perfect, but you got to be within 4 degrees of it. And 4 out of 360 degrees is pretty good. So now the question is, at what cost does that person get there? Because I think you've seen that the people who tout things that are philosophically true north get butchered in our world.
Yeah.
And it's going to take someone that has neither gain nor profit, a willingness to say our country is facing a crisis. 300 people a day is a crisis. That's like a full airplane crashing every day. Somebody would say something if we were crashing airplanes, but we say nothing, and the Democratic Party in this administration hides behind whatever they choose to do to ignore this. We cannot ignore it.
This sort of leads me to the next question having to do with how the rhetoric, the division is so stark. And is there any way to bring back a little more civility to the discourse?
Well, civility is a very interesting word. I was chairman of the Rules Committee. I was probably the nicest, but I would say most effective. A lot of people believe that. Chairman of the Rules Committee, because I would allow debate. I allowed.
You don't learn anything if you don't hear from.
Well,
other people.
Making decisions also, they'll burn your clock down.
Yeah.
I had Mrs. Pelosi that came for me at the Rules Committee for 3.5 hours. She was the minority leader. She wanted to talk about health care. And I just required that people talked about the subject. But I think that debate and knowing where people are beats the stuffings out of, well, this is just where we are. And this is where I think the Democratic Party has fooled America, because the president doesn't say why he wants the borders to be open. He just wants that policy.
Right.
So it's up to us to guess. And this is where I think, being in the majority, we will actually say to Secretary Mayorkas, what is the policy that you're trying to get done? Well, we believe we should have completely open borders, allow as many people to come in the United States, drugs, illegals that might be dangerous on a watch list. It's okay with us.
Well, human trafficking. I mean, go down the list.
We could keep going down
horrific
the litany
things that are happening to people because of this.
And
we in Texas seem to know about it. And,
well, they know about it in Iowa, and they know about it in New York.
Exactly. And now in Martha's Vineyard, they know about it. I mean, that was a stroke of genius, I think, on Governor Abbott's part to send a few busloads.
Let's say what's good for the goose is good for the gander, but that's not my point. My point is engaging them and getting them to either be silent or to state what it is. And then if they're going to be silent and not defend themselves, then it is fair to add your information. So we know that President Biden, when he was a candidate, chose to hang out in the basement. We know that in Arizona, Kari Lake's opponent chose not to debate her.
I know.
We know that this Senate race in Pennsylvania, how that not only materialized itself but turned out. And so the other side has learned to hide.
Yeah.
And then watch us state what we're for and then them criticize that. So we've got to move us to a higher point. And I think that was your point. How do you get to a higher dialogue? How do you actually get. And I think it's important on both sides.
Yeah, I can make it happen. Well, we could go on and on. I want to be respectful of your time. You've got a speech to make momentarily. I like to end these visits with all of my guests with it's a little questionnaire similar to the one the late, great James Lipton would use on Inside the Actors Studio. It's my take on it. And the first question, what is your favorite word?
Can. I have a Down syndrome son, and Alex is 28, and I taught him from the earliest word, the word is can. And if he remembers, so you can say to him, Alex, what's the word? Can.
Wonderful. Yeah. Your least favorite word?
No.
Yeah. What turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
I think a connect. I connected by going to church every Sunday. My grandfather wrote the God and Country Award. Both my grandfathers were PKs. I mean, my parents are PKs
Right.
as a result of their fathers.
Mm-hmm.
I connected materially in my brain and at Philmont Scout Ranch, which is a Boy Scout ranch
My
in
husband's been there, yeah.
northern New Mexico, northeast New Mexico.
Yeah.
At 12,500 feet at about 11 o'clock at night, looking into the heavens.
Yeah.
And not just the shooting stars, but the Milky Way. And there is an order to who we are and what this universe is. When you learn medicine, when you see how intense the Lord, our God, is and what is created, there's still a lot of things we don't know. But it's up to us to find out. But I connect spiritually with the outer doors, with my country, and with my faith.
Well, then what turns you off creatively or emotionally or spiritually?
I think what turns me off is people that conjure up a lack of respect and blame somebody for their own insecurities.
Mm-hmm. What sound do you love the most?
The sound I love the most would be, you ask me something I've never, I enjoy music. And I think a bass guitar I really like.
Good.
I liked it in Lone Survivor.
Mm-hmm.
I like that sound, what it produces, and with high efficiency to motivate me.
Mm-hmm. Then what's your least favorite sound?
Probably my least favorite sound would be hearing, which I do. I live next to a fire station at 2:30 in the morning, hearing someone knowing they're in distress and needing help.
Yeah.
So I hear a siren at 2 in the morning.
I've heard that before from guests.
It's very close.
Yeah. I know it is. You've been a public servant for many years. What other profession would you like to have tried?
Well, I wanted to be a Marine Corps officer. And this was, I got out of college at a time when we had a guy whose name was Jimmy Carter, who was, I think, next to President Biden, the worst president we've ever had. Inconsistent behavior about the understanding of our military, which is why I deeply developed my content from Hans Morgenthau, Politics Among Nations. What is the responsibility of things? So I wanted to be a Marine Corps officer, and actually I worked during the summers for AT&T, and so I just chose to be with AT&T, but wanted to be a Marine Corps officer.
Mm-hmm. What profession do you know you would not want to do?
You know, I don't know. I love picking up trash. I love cleaning up things. Yeah. I love cooking. A profession I probably would not want to do. I don't know. I talked to a guy this morning, the head of the National Forests in Texas, and he's out of Lufkin, Texas. And I told him I grew up wanting to also to be.
You wanted to do that too.
Yeah, a scout.
Sounds like it,
I've climbed around Mount Everest. I've climbed Mount Rainier. I've been all 5 canyons of Big Bend. I like the outdoors. So the least one I'd like to do would be probably a drug counselor.
Yeah, and we need them, but
Well, I would not be made for that because
Yeah.
I don't admire a lack of discipline.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I do understand addiction, but I'm like, quit doing that if
Yeah.
that's the problem. So
Yeah.
probably that.
I hear that. Finally, what do you want to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Welcome, my son, and good and faithful servant. You have made mistakes. You're human. By the way, your dad is over here.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
I love my dad.
I know. Another fine public servant. And we are in your debt. Thank you so much. All the best.
Only wanted to
you?
do well enough to get invited back in.
Hey, well, we absolutely do when we actually know what the balance of power will be. But yeah, let's make this a regular thing. I'd love to keep on top of what's happening in Washington. And we thank you for your service.
Yes, ma'am.
Pete Sessions, thank you. And we thank you for being with us. Join us again. Bye-bye.
Central Texas Life with Ann Harder is part of the Rogue Media family. Be sure to check out our other shows at roguemedianetwork.com. Please rate this show 5 stars on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, or anywhere you get your podcasts. Join us again soon for more Central Texas Life with Ann Harder.